Hey everybody, welcome to the Bro Up Bites podcast. I'm your host, Mace.
And I'm your co-host, Proteus.
All right, well, welcome to episode 5 of our podcast, and today we've got a special episode. We're going to be actually basing the entire episode around a comment from one of our viewers. Josh Ewan8 says, I'm curious to know your thoughts on early access in the gaming industry these days. To me, it's one of those things that used to be rare and exclusive. Now it feels so commonplace, and often games stay in a state of early access for years. Should games be allowed to be in this state over a certain amount of time? Is it as beneficial as some game creators make it seem? Is it a cop-out for other creators? Well, Josh, there is a lot to that question. So obviously we can't answer all of that all at once, and there's a lot of depth and nuance to the response here. But before the show started, I was talking to Proteus, and he said he had a chart he wanted to show me.
Yeah, I did a little research because I was trying to remember around the time that early access started, and I know it was about a decade ago. And so I looked on SteamDB, and I found a chart where they listed the amount of early access games that were released on Steam by year, and the first year was 2013, and that kind of syncs up with my memory of some of the earliest games that were on early access. And I think that's when the program first was opened.
Okay.
And yeah, actually, I just searched. It said that one of the first games that was released on Steam Early Access was Kerbal Space Program, which I
Kerbal
quite a bit
Space
because
Program.
I had quite a few friends who were very interested in that, and it released on March 20th, 2013 on Early Access.
Interesting. So in my research, I found that actually the first early access, based on our modern perception of early access, was it was Minecraft.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I guess I was just limited to Steam because I was actually thinking about that last night when I was going over my notes. I was like, man, that one I totally like that one. And there have been definitely other games before Steam Early Access. But Minecraft, yes, because that would have been back in probably 2009, I believe.
Yeah, it was 2009 was when it was early access. I don't know if they used that nomenclature, but it was definitely in early access back in like 2009 or 2010. It first started as a free alpha. So
yes, it did. And then they
the
started
developer just put it out for free as an alpha, but there was so
Mhm.
many people into it that he was just like, "Oh, I'm going to charge $10 for beta access."
Yeah, and I remember when
And
Notch
people
posted the
bought it
first.
a lot.
Yeah, he posted about it, and then he posted a short trailer that I told one of our mutual friends I thought looked very stupid. And I was like, I was like, these graphics are terrible. Like, this game's never gonna make it. And then look, I mean, it's probably the biggest,
famous last words.
One of the biggest games in the world for over
you could
15 years. The last 15 years.
Probably one of the biggest games in history.
Yeah, and that one, like you said, that was one of those early access games before we had Steam Early Access. And I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of benefits that came from that, and it helped it to become super successful. But early access as a whole, I'm kind of conflicted on. So.
Oh, interesting. I'm actually, after a lot of my research, I went into it kind of open-minded and thinking, actually, from conversations that I had with another one of our friends that we play with often. He's playing Baldur's Gate with us right now. I had a conversation with him about it, and I kind of came away from it with kind of more of a negative perception of early access. But after reading more about it, I don't know. I think it's kind of a mixed bag, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there are definitely pros and cons to having a game that can be that well access to a game and being part of the development process. I think for that
Yeah.
game, um, I don't know it. Thinking back, so like obviously, I think I don't know if Minecraft was the first one because I know that there's
All of
probably
the
been other
sources
games.
that I've read
Yeah.
said it was Minecraft.
Okay.
It's always tough because, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Um, and there may have been other things that tried it and just didn't really work. I also was reading that, some people consider things like Kickstarters early access.
Mm,
Um,
I don't know if I consider that
I
unless
don't
you have
consider it,
access. Yeah,
yeah,
unless they're
because if you
letting you
can't play
download a
it, it's not
build.
early access.
Exactly. So,
It's more of a pre-runner to early access, I would say.
hmm yeah. So Minecraft being one of the early ones, it gave people access to the game. It helped the original developer Notch. I know he took feedback from the players and
Uh-huh.
implemented that and changed a lot of mechanics and based on the testing that they did. And so that one, I mean, but that's like you said, it's one of the one of the success
Yes.
stories and
It's
probably the
obviously a
biggest
perfect
story.
example of how early access can be very beneficial, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's several other games that have been in early access and have actually released, but
Oh,
I was
absolutely. Yeah.
thinking back. So Kerbal Space Program, that one definitely that got. I don't even remember when the official release for that one, the final release date for that. I'd have to let me look that up. Release date. So it came out. I guess it was only in early access for a couple years. So it said the official release date was Steam Early Access in 2013. So it took a couple years, and I do remember that actually finished. But at the same time, there was 7 Days to Die. Have you ever played that
Yeah,
one or
I
heard of
was
that one?
literally just about to pull that one up. 7 Days to Die is an insane example of
Yes.
what can happen. Now, okay, so a lot of these, I looked up a bunch of games, and a lot of them I had this impression of, okay, that game was in early access for eternity.
Hmm.
It was in early access so long, and my guess is their player base was falling off, and they decide, okay, finally we're gonna do a full release just so that we can get our players back.
Yeah.
But the charts don't show that. The charts show consistent growth of that game all the way up
Hmm.
until release. I mean, if you look at this chart for 7 Days to Die,
Yeah, because that
all the
one
way up to
released.
release, it just kept growing and growing. And in fact, it blew up right before release.
Yes, when they finally. Well, I mean that's kind of an extreme one because it was nearly 11 years. Because it's I think it
Oh,
was
yeah.
end of 2013, like
Yep.
December.
Initially was December
Yeah, yeah,
2013.
and then it released in July. I think was 1.0.
July was 1.0.
Then that's good. So back in
Well,
2013, I'll kind of just start where I looked on when I was researching was that early access there were about 7 games on Steam that were considered early access. And one of those, obviously being 7 Days to Die. I think Project Zomboid was also
yeah,
another
that's
one
another one that was
because there were a
really,
lot of
really
zombie.
old.
There's a lot of zombie games in early access. And then, so from 2013 to 2014, it jumped from around 7 games, and then it went to 62 games. Like, okay, well, that's, not quite tenfold, but close. The following year after that, it was 190. And then from there, it's just been either doubling, well, it either, sometimes it doubles, sometimes it's just a percentage. But as of last year, what's your guess on how many early access games there were in 2023 that were released, I guess, as an early access,
That
like
were released
that were
into early
into
access.
early access on Steam?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 2000.
Pretty close, actually. Around 1900, well,
You're
1930.
kidding me.
So
Okay.
yeah. And then this year, it's on track to beat that so far. Because right now, it's already at 1,951 as of this latest chart. And it's been interesting because, like, if you look at the amount of games, early access games that are released into early access by month, it's just a steady climb on the graph. And it kind of hit in May of this year, there were almost 270 early access games that were put out on Steam. And so I guess the benefits of early access obviously are a lot of small indie developers can get the funding that they need to essentially work on a game or putting this game out without a publisher, like a big publisher, if they can do it themselves, or work with small indie publishing companies and things like that. But they can get that funding without having to go get like a loan or somebody else to invest, like many other game developers have had to do in the past. And the games industry has always, the big companies and even the smaller ones have always had to go get somebody to invest in their
because
their game.
the game doesn't make itself, and it's assumed that the developers are working on this full time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it gives it kind of opens the door to much smaller developers so that they can get their game out there, which that's great. On the flip side, it's also a lot of small developers get that and they don't know how to manage it, I think. And so they might get this influx of people buying, and then I feel like there's an expectation, a lot of times an unrealistic expectation from the buyers or the consumers of the games, that they're like, oh, well, I paid for it, so it needs to be done like on my timeline. And a lot of times these teams are small. They might even be single person projects that they don't have the same timeline as the players want. And so then you see players either being collaborative or the opposite. I don't know. Have you seen that before too?
What do you mean by players being the opposite of collaborative?
Well, they just complain. They berate the developer. They say, they go on there like, I paid for this game, and even though it's like and that's the thing, it's out there.
Okay, I see
and
what you mean.
It's on the store, so some people don't read. They skip over the early access banner that's like right there, and they're like, hey, I wanted to play this game, and it doesn't have these mechanics yet, and it's like, and so they give it like thumbs down. They say lots of terrible comments.
It can definitely backfire, in a big way.
Yeah, and so I've seen some early access games that have kind of died because of that, where they had these big expectations and they didn't meet them fast enough, and so the project just kind of died. And some of them, it's interesting to see some that they've never released out of early access, and they're just still there. People can buy them, but there's no active development by any person or studio, and that's kind of the bad side, I think.
So that kind of brings me back to part of Josh's question, right? Where he says, should they only be allowed to stay in a state of early access for a certain amount of time? Essentially is what he's getting at. And I struggle with that because I don't think that they should have any kind of like, oh, you need to have the game done in a certain amount of time or whatever, right? So no, but at the same time, if the studio has halted development, if they're not developing it anymore, there needs to be some kind of information out there available.
Yes,
this game is dead in development. It is technically not finished, but it will not be finished.
Yeah, and I think in those cases, sometimes there needs to be some sort of penalty to you shouldn't have a game out there that's in early access that people can buy, and they think, oh, it's in early access, it's still being developed. So it needs to be flagged as, there have not, like you said, there haven't been updates in a certain amount of time. And after a certain amount of time, beyond that, it's going to be like Steam should say, hey, like we're delisting, or we're going to take it down, and it shouldn't be available for sale because you're just selling a broken product. And I've seen that too many times where I've been scrolling, like Steam has the, recommended game sometimes where it'll say, look in your game queue. And I've seen some where it popped them up and it's like, I read the comments and reviews, and people are like, "Oh yeah, this was really promising, but there hasn't been an update in 8 to 12 months," and it's like,
Yeah, and
okay,
that's
if you're on early,
ridiculous.
if you're doing early access, there kind of is a expectation as a developer that you have to communicate with the people that have bought your game. They bought early
Right, because
access.
they're funding
They're
your development. You don't have
yeah,
shareholders, you don't have
yeah,
investors, but you kind of do
yeah,
because you have the people who are buying your game in good faith, believing that you are going to continue to update it.
yeah, and that's the thing with early access is that I don't believe a lot of these new developers understand that. They think, hey,
Uh,
I need the funding to make this game, and they're very
and I
passionate
can't get
about the
it any
game.
other way.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, I can do this, but okay, you want to do that? You need to communicate with those that are
Yes,
paying your bills, basically. Um,
absolutely.
so I
Yeah.
think it's interesting to see the ones like so we had mentioned 7 Days to Die earlier. That one, almost 11 years in development. One thing with them,
I
and
didn't
I
think it
that's
would
the
ever
thing.
come out, honestly. I thought
I
they were
didn't
just
think it
gonna
would.
milk I thought they were just milking it, the early access thing, so that when people criticize them, they could just say, "Oh, it's early access."
Yeah.
Which brings up another point is that is a lot of developers will actually do that. That is a thing.
Oh
Developers
yeah.
will put a game in early access, quote unquote, so that they can brush off any criticism and just say, "Oh,
Yes.
well,
They're
it's
like,
not
oh well, it's
finished. Of course
still
it's
it's
got problems."
yeah, it's in development. But to be fair to 7 Days to Die, I got one of my friends actually got it for me. Like I think the first year it was out.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, because he was
I heard
really
it was
interested.
pretty scuffed when it first came out.
It was very rough, but you could see the potential, and
Uh-huh.
it was one of those like, oh well, because at that point it was already several years like into the like Minecraft had been out and people were wanting like they liked zombies and they're like, oh, we can do crafting and building and all this stuff in this big world of zombies, and so
Yes.
like it was interesting to my friend. So he got a copy and we played it for a while, and I was like, wow, this is rough. I was like, I'm gonna wait for some updates. So I think we tried it a year later, and it was still very rough, but there was a big community, and the developers never stopped communicating with the people that were funding them. They
Yeah.
always had updates. They listed feedback. I remember watching some of their dev logs where they were just saying like, we hear what you're saying. We know that this is kind of a bad mechanic or this is broken. We're gonna work on this, and they put stretch goals and like, hey, we're gonna try to fix this by this time. And honestly, like they kept updating it and they kept communicating, and that's the biggest part that
Yes.
I think is that's so important for early access, so that people can build trust, between the developer and the community.
Yep.
Because if you don't have that trust, it ends up like so many other ones. I'm trying to remember. There
Well,
was
and
one
here's the other thing
other.
is you look at the
Yeah.
success of Project Zomboid, of 7 Days to Die, and some others, right? You look at the success of those, and what are the things that made them so successful? Well, their fan base was supported. They supported the people that were paying for them to continue to develop. And those people will be your evangelists, right? And continue to spread the game to others,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So it gives you the possibility. I don't think it's realistic, especially with how saturated the market is,
Hmm.
for these games that are being released into early access to expect anything like what we're seeing with Project Zomboid or 7 Days to Die. Which, by the way, Project Zomboid is still not full release.
Yeah, that's also. I mean, that one's also as old or a little bit old. It's a little bit older than
November
It is.
2013, so it's 1 month
So it's
older.
yeah, so another zombie game that's over a decade in development. Um, but that one I think still has quite a few. I mean, look at the players right now. 20, is that
Oh,
accurate? 21,
it
or I guess 21,000.
absolutely exploded in 2022.
Yeah, I know there were some major
Um,
updates because this was another one that my friend was very interested in. He likes zombie games,
yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah, I mean
one
their
that I
player base, their player counts are like they're competitive,
yeah
even comparatively to like AAA titles.
Yeah, and it's one of the games I was trying to think of, and I just had to Google it because I couldn't find it on Steam. It's because one of them got removed from sale. So this one
Oh,
was, and I remember this one because everyone was like, there was so much hype at the time. So 2014, September, there was a game called Starforge. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
I
It
have
was
heard of
in
Starforge. Yes.
Yes. I think it's in my I think I either bought it. I know I played it. So it was in development. It was another like, oh, it's gonna be the next Minecraft. It's, this massive,
Okay. Oh boy.
resource gathering, base building, crafting on an alien planet. Um, and it was one that it was just it was very tumultuous. Lots of people bought into it, and the development team, I don't think they understood what they got into. Like they
Yeah.
they were not they did not communicate. That what they did communicate was also, all over the place. And then I think there was on the development team there was some drama that caused them to just break up the team. And then for a long time, it was still listed for sale on Steam, and it just like had no updates at all. So you could never, there was nothing being done. And then I said that it was removed in 2017, so it was still up for multiple years. Um, and so it's kind of crazy that like it blew up and then just kind of crashed and burned, which is sad, but it's also one of those cautionary tales of early access of, people that got into it didn't understand the true cost, because some of it was like they didn't know. I don't think they had the skill level totally. Like the team didn't have the technical skills to support the game like they wanted to, and then they
Absolutely.
also didn't know how to manage the community.
Yep. Well, and you're gonna run into that with this, right?
Yeah.
These are small business. It's like somebody opening a mom and pop shop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And what is it for like small business owners? What's the percentage that actually end up making it past, I think, 10 years? It's something insanely
It's
low.
pretty low. Yeah, it's
It's
really
well,
low.
it's definitely below 10%. I
Yeah, and
believe
even
it's
in the
lower than
first,
that.
I think even in the first 5 years,
Yeah,
if that,
I think
because
it is
yeah,
5 years actually. Yeah. So
yeah,
you got to think of it that way, right? If you're buying a game that's entering early access, there is no promise that it is ever going to be finished.
yeah, and I think
So
the
I,
community or the
I
gaming
like,
community needs to set their expectations properly.
yes,
Uh,
absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that I think when I think about it is this is essentially like buying into a Kickstarter, right? When you buy
mhm.
into a Kickstarter, there is no guarantee of delivery.
Yeah.
There isn't. So when you buy into an early access game, it's a little bit better because at least you have something.
Hmm.
But yeah, you can't really expect you can't guarantee that it's ever going to get across the finish line.
Yeah, exactly.
So I
Um,
you brought up that I wanted to bring up another cautionary tale of
oh,
early access, and that is Star Citizen.
oh, wow. Yeah. How
Yeah,
long that one's been in early access a while.
it's been in early access for a long time.
When did it initially release for like initial, let's see. Initial release was December 11th, 2015.
So 2015, okay. So
Wow.
the reason why I bring that one up is because that is a game that has been in early access for years and years and years and
Hmm.
has not ever come close to delivering on its promises.
And so I didn't realize it. So they did a successful Kickstarter
Yes.
in 2012. It
Yeah,
said it
they
drew in
they
$2
got a
million.
ton of money from their Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But now this is a problem. This the problem with this one was it was overly ambitious.
Oh, absolutely.
It
That
was a
game.
team of people
Whew.
who were like, we're gonna do this thing and it's gonna be huge and it's gonna be like they were shooting for the AAA level, right?
Yeah.
Or even
Yeah.
beyond, really, is what they were advertising. But it never panned out because guess what? They don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to develop it,
Yeah.
even with a successful Kickstarter. There's just not. They don't have the money to do that.
Well, I'm
And
looking. They've raised. Do you really? Oh, I don't know if you've seen. It says, at least on Wikipedia. So this is,
okay,
take this with a grain of salt. After the initial Kickstarter ended, so it's being developed by Cloud Imperium Games.
okay,
So they continued to raise funds through the in-game content, which I'm sure some of you
right.
have heard that
Oh
they've
yeah.
sold ships for thousands of dollars and stuff like in-game ships. And it's noted as being one of the highest funded crowdfunding projects. They have raised over 700 million
No.
US dollars as
Okay,
of
so
May of this year.
thank you for making me eat my words.
Holy.
Yeah, 700 million. Okay, so then there's no excuse. There's
Yeah, at
no
this point.
excuse for the state that that game is in. Now,
Yeah, that
I
7.
I full disclosure, I've never played it before. I
Hmm.
have seen some family members play it,
Oh, you have. Okay.
and
I've
yes,
not. So
and
I've just
from
watched
what I
YouTube.
have seen, it looks like a broken beta of a AAA game,
Yeah.
from like maybe 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And
I've
that's the
I've
other
watched a
issue,
few
right? Is
streamers.
that when you have a game that's in early access for so long, you run that risk, especially if you're trying to make it look triple A, quote unquote, is by the time it's done, it's going to look dated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's probably going to feel dated too. I mean, it was pretty bad what I saw of it. I was pretty unimpressed.
Yeah, it has a lot, like from what I've read and seen, it's like it has a lot of ideas that it wants to do that are very ambitious. And if they did them, it would be incredible, but it's like it's been in development for over a decade. So at this point, and after the seeing that they've earned 700 million, which that blows my mind. That like
Where's all that
AAA
money
games.
going?
I mean, you look at well, more recently, what was it? Concord failed with apparently. We were talking about this in our last episode. We thought it was
400
200.
million.
Or now, yeah, we
400
thought
million.
200. Now it's $400 million over 8 years, and this one is 700 million over a
Yes.
decade. So it's like, ugh.
But 700 million, it's just 700 million. You could do so much. And you know what? I don't, unlike with AAAs, they weren't spending the lion's share of that on marketing. Because I tell you what, I
Yeah,
haven't seen any marketing for it.
yeah. They've all done. They started with the crowdfunding. They've kind of gone word of mouth by those that are playing it.
Uh huh.
Which I guess apparently has worked in their favor. But I don't. I mean, there's no date. They have not given a estimated release date, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is one of those games where they're just gonna keep it in early access and just say it's a game that will always be in early access. It'll constantly be evolving. It'll never
See,
really be
but
done.
then it's not early access. That's called a live service. That is not early access. That's called a live service. Calling it
Yeah,
early access when it's actually a live service is just trying to defend yourself against criticism.
yeah. Yeah, that one just boggles my mind. The amount of money
It,
that's gone into that.
yeah,
Um, but
it's wild.
I wanted to ask, since that's kind of a massive game. I noticed, and this is something I hadn't really been thinking about, but when I did look, you can actually search for just early access titles on Steam,
Oh yeah, of
and
course.
it'll bring up like a kind of a page that's set aside for it. One thing that I did notice was an increase in early access titles from actual major developers, and
Yes,
it kind of
and
has
that
surprised
is
me.
concerning.
Yes, and that's I wanted to talk to you about that and see what your thoughts were because looking at it, and there was one that came up, and I remembered hearing about it in like a preview event because I have the first game. I don't know if you've heard of the game Greedfall. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I know of
it's
Greedfall.
yeah, it's a kind of an action RPG. It's kind of in the vein of Mass Effect. You have different choices and things like that.
Sure.
It's developed by Spiders, and they've made lots. They've had lots of other games. They've done Bound by Flame. They did Steel Rising, and they have some other games that you may not be familiar with. But
Yeah.
Greedfall 1, it was not in early access. It was a game that got released. It was 2019, I think. So it's been 5 years. And it was published by Focus. I remember it was a Focus game because Focus does a lot of their
Oh,
games.
Focus Interactive. published it?
Yeah, or Focus Entertainment. Yeah,
Oh,
they
Focus Entertainment, not Interactive. You're correct. Yeah.
yeah Focus Entertainment. And so it's been 5 years since that one. They did talk about potentially doing a sequel a couple years back, and now they are, but it was just released, I guess, yesterday into early
Still,
access.
still being published by Focus.
No, actually, it's by Nacon, so which is
Oh,
interesting. So they switched.
really?
Yeah, Nacon. They more recently published.
Hmm.
Well, I guess last year, the RoboCop game, which definitely interested in that. Um, they're doing the new Test Drive Unlimited, or that one just came out, didn't it? Test Drive. What was it? Solar Crown. That's like a new one. So, but they did work with them when they published Steel Rising, which is a game kind of want to go try and play. It's a
Yeah, I
Souls-like.
have it, but I haven't.
Yeah.
I haven't booted it up yet.
But anyways, I was confused by the fact that they went into early access, and I don't understand exactly why and why a major publisher and developer that have released multiple games are going for early access like that. I don't understand it,
Yeah, I don't get that either.
and I feel like it goes kind of against it goes against the norm, or even kind of the like unwritten code of early access. Like early access was made for these smaller developers, and
Yes.
I feel like it's kind of taking advantage of that. And even one that has had very positive reviews, Hades 2. They don't have Hades 3
Yes.
yet. Hades
Hades
2.
2.
That was earlier in the spring. Supergiant released it into early access. It's still in early access, and I was like, I
Super
thought
Giant.
Hades, yeah, and I thought
Hades
Hades
1 was early access. It
was
was
it
an
also
early
early
access.
access?
Yes, it was an early access title.
Which I don't know. They were successful with Bastion. I thought Transistor was moderately successful.
The issue that I have with it is I've always felt that early access was there to help people who were trying to find their footing, right? To get
Exactly.
started.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be for major publishers who can get financial backing. And it
Hmm.
concerns me that they're doing that because it takes away a lot of the risk, which is
Hmm.
not a bad thing, right? Taking away
Yeah.
risk is a good thing because it allows them to be more creative. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, it also means that they're willing to just throw whatever out there in early access,
Hmm.
and what sticks sticks and what doesn't, then okay, well, no harm, no foul, except there is
Yeah.
harm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the other thing is then you end up with the a repeat of Atari's sins.
Hmm.
You remember back in, I think it was the 80s. Well, I mean, obviously we weren't around in the 80s, but you've surely heard about the gaming crash of the 80s, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was
It's pretty
caused
well
by
documented.
it was caused by Atari just completely flooding the market with
With
these
shovelware,
games.
right?
Yeah, it's just shovelware. And so I think that is potentially something that could happen with too much early access, where it's just like, oh, we're just going to put everything out and it doesn't really matter. Like, there's no, is this actually a viable product? It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, throw it out there, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And then nobody will want
Yeah.
to buy into early access. Players lose trust in early access, and the whole system dies.
Well, yeah, and I mean, even with the small developers, I've kind of lost a lot of trust in early access because of some of
Hmm.
those earlier games that took forever to come out. But
Typically, if
I,
I buy a game in early access, a lot
yeah,
of times it's from somebody who's already had a successful game come out of early access.
yeah, and that's
So, like, I have Forgive Me Father 2, which you got
yeah,
for me, but I wanted to
yeah,
get it.
yeah,
And they had Forgive Me Father 1 that released out of early access successfully. So they already gained my trust there. But that
yeah,
sucks because again, the point is to help people who don't have that fan base to support them.
yeah, or access to financial backers, like actual
Yes,
investors.
exactly.
Which I actually, as we've been talking, I was trying to think through this because to me it's I don't know. It just blows my mind that they have these major developers that have released successful games, releasing either sequels, and that's the thing. Hades 2, Greedfall 2. There's another. I was trying to find. There was another one. The Ark Ascended, was it Survival Ascended, where they already had the first one super
Mm.
successful.
That's actually one that was in my notes. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But before I lose my train of thought, real quick, before we get into
Yes.
Ark, these developers like that are releasing these sequels, I think it may be a result of what has happened in the AAA gaming industry. Like for developers, I think we've touched on it before, like the massive budgets that are like ballooning out of control, and how certain publishers aren't wanting to take any risks at all. Like how we've been disappointed that there aren't these double A games, that there's only triple A, quadruple A games that publishers, they're like, I'm gonna only release a sequel to a major franchise, and I will not touch anything with a 10-foot pole. That
Yep.
is not going to guarantee
I'm only going to use
revenue.
mechanics that are proven.
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean, we're on. I don't even know what Assassin's Creed Shadows, like what number it's on at this point. Like that's the next one, and it's like, okay, well that one you're using the same formula, and everything that they release, it's a sequel or a remake of something that's already been successful, and we have seen
oh yeah.
such a big decline in double A gaming, and some of my favorite games from the PS3 360 era were those double A titles that tried something different, that
Yes.
you typically wouldn't get, and that had they had big budgets compared to indie games, but they were not nearly as big as some of the like Call of Duties and Assassin's Creeds and everything else, GTA's of the world. And I feel like this may be the effect of that, like the lack of investment from the big companies, Ubisoft, EA, Sony, Microsoft, all of them. Like and even some of the mid tier publishers, like I was saying, like Focus, like they were the ones that published the original Greedfall, and now they had to switch publishers. But maybe that's kind of why it's happening. So it's there, and while it's not, I don't think it's good. I think it's bad for the industry and for early access that they do that. But I think it is probably just an effect of how major publishers have been making it so hard to make games like that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I
Maybe.
understand that. I kind of agree with you on there. It's sad, to be
Yeah.
honest, because I see things like I like Resident Evil, but when I look at Capcom's catalog and what they release nowadays, it's like, okay, so you release a Resident Evil game every couple of years, you have Street Fighter,
Monster Hunter.
you'll re-release Mega Man games as like collections or whatever,
Yeah.
Monster Hunter, right?
And then
And
Street Fighter
everything
Super
everything
Alpha
is
Turbo.
everything is
Uh,
franchise now. Like
yeah.
that's the only thing that major publishers care about is franchises. And then
Yeah.
they're not doing anything new.
And they used to take risk, and that's the thing. Like some of the best franchises came because they took risks back in the day.
Yep.
And it's so sad to see just the sequels and then remasters, re-releases constantly.
So I
I
wanted
don't
to
know.
expand a little bit on what you were saying though about how, it's not a good thing to see games that are early access coming from maybe not major publishers, but fairly big publishers, right?
Yeah.
Is Can you imagine them being like, okay, we're going to release Splinter Cell into early access?
Ugh, that would be so
Or
weird.
the next Resident Evil game is going to be early access?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's something that I could see happening. Them being like, oh, it works for them, so why don't we do
Why
it?
not? Yeah. No,
And then
that's
we can release an even more broken product.
and that's the thing. Even it's just a change of name, because right now, even the triple A games that are releasing, they're released broken and in a state that it's like they
It
didn't
essentially is
test it
early
enough.
access.
Yeah, and to buy a game on release date, is just like, okay, well, you're gonna have to put up with all these bugs that you could wait a year, and then maybe they'll all be patched by
Hmm.
then, maybe not.
You don't even have to
It
wait that long. So, a lot of times 6 months is all you got to wait, and then most of it will be in a much better state
than where it was at launch.
than where it
Yeah,
was at launch, and you'll get it for like 30 to 50% off.
yeah, it's it's crazy. It's sad to see that's where
Now,
we're
of
at
course,
in the
if
industry.
everybody thought like us on that, then it would never get fixed because they wouldn't get the money that they need to finish it.
Yeah, that's true.
but but you know what
Uh,
else? They would probably make more money if they would just release it finished because people like you and I might be more inclined to pay full price
yeah, no,
for a
I
finished
definitely
product.
would. I would. I mean, I would probably buy a game at launch, which I rarely do. I don't. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think the last one I got, but it's very rare nowadays, just because of the amount of patching and how broken a game.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. It's crazy how bad it is.
Yeah,
Anyway, so yeah, that was just my other thing is, there's nothing stopping AAA from doing the same thing.
yeah, and
And I think once you get to that point, then to answer Josh's question, absolutely, it's a terrible bad thing, and it needs to end. It needs to stop, or not end completely, but it needs to, be more controlled.
yeah, there needs to be some sort of
Or there needs to
system.
be enough pushback from consumers. Consumers need to be smart enough to say, hey, you know what, Capcom, you can't release games into early access. I'm not going to buy that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you said, if Resident Evil was put into early access, I'm sure people would buy it. That's the thing.
Oh, yeah, they would.
Is like
I'm
they
okay,
would,
so
and they'd probably complain about it and whatever, but they would still give them the money. Which, as a consumer, you have to, speak with your wallet. You have
yes.
to. Otherwise, they're gonna keep exploiting you. That's the horse armor
Yes.
thing. What you
Yes.
bought the horse armor, and guess what? That's where we're at now. We're
Yes.
how many
Precisely.
over a decade
Uh,
later.
okay, you know what? That whole thing, what you're saying, there's a famous line from Asmon Gold where he says, "It's just the way it is," you know? So his
Yeah.
his opinion is you can't vote with your wallet because no matter what, no matter how many games you don't buy, somebody else
Mhm.
is still buying it. And so every one of their dollars counts for a
Mm,
million or 60
yeah,
of
I think
your
he's I think
you're
he's
not
wrong
voting.
though.
No, he
Look
is
what
wrong.
happened.
He's
Yeah, he's completely
objectively
wrong.
wrong.
Like, look what happened to Concord. Like that is one of the strongest cases of
Uh-huh.
they were
And
trying to feed us something.
even if people do buy it, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That's the issue with that argument is that even if people do buy it, these
Hmm.
businesses have projections. And when they
Yeah.
don't meet their projections, then they take notice, or at least their
Oh, dude.
investors do. And their
Yeah.
investors will say, what's going on?
Well, have you seen the recent news this week about Ubisoft?
um,
Their
no, I haven't really read much
their
about it.
expectations of Star Wars Outlaws were not met for their investors. They were
Yes.
very bad. And are I they are going back to the drawing board on some stuff, and they actually delayed the new Assassin's Creed to next year now
Oh, it
because
got
of it.
delayed that
It got
long?
pushed. It got pushed to next year. I don't know. I think it's in the spring now, maybe early next year. But it got
Whoa.
pushed because that's how bad that they did, and they got so much pushback, and they. I mean, we can talk about that on a different episode,
So
but
I guess we know what kind of state that game was about to come out in.
oh yeah, and just some of the interesting corporate messaging that was sent out afterwards. I think we
Yeah.
can probably
Let's not get in the weeds on
localize.
that too much.
Yeah,
Let's
so
focus in on this main topic we got.
yeah. Uh, so, anyways, yeah, I think early access. There's pros and cons.
Yeah.
I I don't like where it's going right now. I think there's too many games in early access. I think there's too many unfinished games. And I think that the system needs to change because
It is being
it is
abused.
it's being abused, and it's exploiting consumers and their wallets because of that. And
Yep.
it needs I think Steam needs to put some limitations. And like you had mentioned, if a game's not being updated in a certain amount of time, it needs to be taken down from sale. Like it does not need to stay up.
Yes. Or it needs to be forced to be marked as complete.
Yeah,
Because
one thing or
you
another.
can add on to a complete game.
Yeah,
That's not the issue, right? So these developers who are like, oh, it's still in early access because it's not complete because we still have more features we want to add.
and just
It's
call it
like, yes, but
DLC.
is the core game there?
Yeah,
Because if the core game is there, it's not early access.
yeah.
If you're gonna add on additional content, more maps, whatever, that's not necessarily, you know, that's just DLC. And it could be
Yeah,
free DLC, but it's
exactly.
DLC. Anywho,
Uh, yeah, well, from that,
yeah,
since I think we've covered everything that Josh
yeah.
was looking for. So what have you been playing recently?
A lot of stuff. I don't even remember where I left off last time we were talking. I played through Pacific Drive, and I won't talk about that here because I'm putting together a review for that. So
Oh, I'm excited
keep
to hear
your
that one.
yeah, keep your eyes out for that one. That one should be coming soon, I hope. It's my first review video, so it might take a minute for me to finish it. And then I also played Crisis 2
Oh yeah,
and I started on Crisis 3. So
nice.
I'll talk about Crisis 2 a bit because it was a really interesting play for me. So I
Yeah,
played Crisis 1, and that's the one you always hear about, and
yeah,
I really didn't like it. It
yeah. It was
it
pretty rough
wasn't
around the
very
edges.
it wasn't very enjoyable to me. There was a big issue with enemy awareness.
Hmm.
So it was like, they try and have the stealth mechanic, but all of these areas are these huge sprawling areas, and the enemies seem to have infinite line of sight. Like they can see you from forever away, and it's not always clear what
Yeah,
is
that
and is not cover. You could be
I
hiding
think
behind a bush, but the game doesn't consider that cover.
I
And
think that
so it's
was
like
a
somebody sees me, but I
continuation.
don't know where they are.
Yeah, the so Crysis, Crytek, they developed the original Far Cry game. I don't know if you're aware of
Yes,
that.
yes, I
So
did
I
know that.
believe Far Cry also had some
It had the same
crazy
issue. Yeah,
laser focused enemies.
it
So,
did have the same issue.
yeah.
So
So.
that was a big problem for me. And then just the feel of the movement and the gunplay, it just wasn't there for me.
Hmm.
Crisis 2, while it was a little bit more like kind of a generic shooter from the 360 era where everything was a first person shooter and they all kind of felt the same. It is a little bit more like that, but I liked the powers. They gave you more energy so you could use the armor mode and the stealth a lot better.
Yeah.
The weapons felt better, the movement speed was increased, and the biggest improvement I think they made was they made it so that the level design. Sorry, that's my point. The level design was a lot better. The way it kind of gives you different routes that you can take through the map.
Yeah.
Like you pull up this visor and it tells you, oh, this is one route that you could potentially take. This is another. This is another. And you could kind of tell that one, it's like this is meant to be more of a stealth route, or this one is going to be more of a like guns blazing, get in there and get it done kind of route.
Hmm.
So I thought that was pretty enjoyable. I really liked it. I recommend Crisis 2. I only recommend Crisis 1 for academic reasons. Like if you're an academic gamer,
Historical purposes.
yes, then you might like it, but yeah, I'm a fairly
Yeah.
academic gamer and I still didn't really enjoy it very much.
Yeah, I'd also recommend Crysis 2. I did play it back at launch, and even though it
Oh, it's
probably
probably so
performed.
much better now.
Oh yeah, the remastered version is probably way better than the PS3 version.
Yeah, I know the remastered version got some flack for its performance on release. It was buttery smooth for me.
Oh, that's great
It
to hear.
crashed for me once at the very end,
Hmm.
but
Well,
yes.
I may have to go back and check out the remastered version because I enjoyed that game a lot.
Yeah, you should. Okay, so what have you been playing? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this last week, the Plucky Squire was released on PlayStation Plus Premium, I believe. And so I jumped into that just for a little bit. I played the first part of the first uh, level world thing with my daughter. So it honestly, the style is so strong in that game. It is
Mm-hmm.
just like the design that they went with the whole, kind of storybook. You're in a storybook initially, and then you get to interact outside of the storybook shortly after the first part. And it's just really cool. I love the parts that are animated in the book. First little bit that I played, it feels like old school Zelda. So, you have your sword, you get to like chop
Okay.
down bushes and hit trees and get coins and stuff out of those. And you're running around the map doing some basic puzzling. But it has style, man. I haven't played a whole lot of it. I just tried it the other day for a little bit. And I'm excited to go back to it. Yeah, like I said, my daughter loved the visuals. It's super bright,
It,
super
the
happy.
artistic direction on that just looks amazing.
Yeah, and I was playing on PS5, and it looked great, like on my big screen. So, it was pretty cool. I'm excited to go back to it. I want to check out more of the 3D part of it with the going outside of the storybook because like at the part where you're supposed to start journeying outside of it. But there's some cool stuff in there, and yeah, I won't spoil any of it. But there's a really funny part pretty early on. But yeah, I'm excited to
Okay.
go back to that. Beyond that, though, I am actually there was a game that I picked up yesterday. I'd heard
Oh.
about it. I don't know if it was from the Indie Fest or whatever on Steam, but it is called Beyond Galaxyland.
Ooh,
I think
yes,
it
I saw that you started playing that.
Yes, it was I think developed by one guy, Sam Enright. It's published by United Label. It is a very also great art style. It has this kind of pixel art aesthetic. It's actually a 2D side scroller with some light platforming and puzzles, but it is a turn-based RPG. So you're, traveling through these maps like and it's kind of almost a little bit adventure game esque. Like you go around trying to figure out the story, talking to people. It has a lot of elements that I was a little nervous because hearing that it had so many different. So it's turn based RPG. It has monster collection, not exactly Pokemon, but like they're you collect them as summons during the fights. It also, I mean, the platforming part I mentioned that. Like, so it's also kind of I don't think it's Metroidvania esque yet. I'm still trying to figure that out because you can find stuff in the environment. But the style of it is very unique. You have to go. You have to go check out some of the shots from it and some of the
Yeah,
trailers because it's
I'll go
really
look at
cool
it.
looking. And I'm excited. It's actually out on Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, and I believe Switch as well. So it's across all the consoles. It's gotten some pretty high scores across some of the smaller publications like Nintendo Life and God is a Geek and stuff. Some of them they've given it 9 out of 10. And I'm only a couple hours in, but the combat system is very nice. It's a unique take on it. It's a little different than I'm used to. It has some uh, when you're playing the turn-based battles, there are like button prompts and stuff to help you, do the attacks and things like that and augment your defense. And so I do like that it's kind of an active turn-based game. But the story is very interesting to me. It's this really cool sci-fi story, and it's starts on Earth and goes way beyond that. So I won't give much away on that because I'm excited myself to see where it goes.
Well, that's
But right
awesome.
now, yeah, I'm excited to get back into it. So I'll
Nice.
keep you guys posted once I hopefully eventually finish it.
I look forward to hearing some more about it.
Yeah,
Sounds cool. All
yeah,
right, well, thanks everybody for joining us and for sticking around if you made it this far. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and especially comment.
yeah. We look forward to hearing from you.